This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by the Genesis Company. Coming at Friday morning, it's December 29th after the Wolves picked up their 23rd win of the season last night against Dallas, who was playing without Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. I've got Kyle Tighe here for the Friday pod, and we're going to get into that game. Kyle, we've definitely crossed over into the stage of this thing where all of the wins are important, but they're not exactly created equal. I thought last night was maybe one of the best or biggest examples of that. Just being at the game, being at Finch's press conference afterwards, being in the locker room afterwards. I mean, I've covered a lot of losses. It felt like that, and how the majority of the discourse afterwards was talking about what this team isn't doing, which I do that every day out here, but it is a bit, I was just sitting there at the end of it. It is a bit bizarre to be like, okay, they won this game. Have won 23 of their 30 games. And it feels like so much of this is them wanting and expecting to be better. And there isn't, you listened to some of those clips from after the game too. I'm sure you picked up on that, and we're going to play those clips in this episode. But I think it's just it's an interesting thing about the team that has the best record in basketball to be a team that is frustrated with their performance. And they have been. That wasn't just isolated to last night. I get they should have beat Dallas by more without Kyrie and Luka, but it's just an interesting dynamic. But first things first, how are you? What's up? Happy Friday.
Yeah, I was going to say good morning. You really, no foreplay there. You just wanted to get right into it. I thought you wanted to do maybe 15 minutes on TV ratings, because that seemed to be the dominant conversation this week on the timeline. I didn't know people cared that much about the NBA ratings. But I tuned in last night.
Just had to get that in there.
Well, I don't, the conversations this week online have never been dumber. I respect that everyone has the week off. I'm working today, but we all need to get back to work, because the people are just like digging up Ja Morant video interviews from a year ago, and my brain can't keep up. And then a Pop-Tart got eaten on live TV last night. So anyway, we were talking offline. I have listened to all the clips. We've got some really good clips. Home games are the best because you get these audio, locker room, post-game stuff. I don't know where my opinion is. I think I'm going to therapeutically talk it out over the next hour. I might just go devil's advocate on stuff. But yeah, it's been 200 and, it's December 29th. The Wolves only have one more game this year, 2023. That's against the Lakers on Saturday. But it's been 274 days since they've last lost back-to-back regular season games. So you would think that's like a party and a celebration.
That's what I'm talking about. Like that is not the prevailing emotion at all. Like it's not just me being negative. It is like, if you're in there, that it is that they're not thinking about the having not lost 2 games in a row thing, which is awesome. They're thinking about the 15 turnovers that they had in the first half last night. It's an interesting mentality.
Well, I kind of drunkenly texted you this last night, but it's weird that the vibes almost a year ago to the date seem the same in the locker room and in the press conferences of just what's going on. We got to fix stuff. And last year it was a players only meeting after losing to the Pistons, and this year it's like everyone is included in the meeting invite thing for a team that's 23-7. Like my new bit is just trying to compare this, because I do think, as we now work this out and have a therapy session, that you do need to break down what they're doing every night by winning these games, because they've had 34 years of incompetence essentially. And last night, they get to 23-7. That's the same amount of wins that they had in Ant's rookie year, but they also had 49 losses that season, and now they have 7. So it is a big deal to kind of be like, hey, look how far we've come. Like, this is where we're at. But I also would be lying if I said I'd be lying if I said I don't love the vibes, because I do love the vibes of Finch and others being like, we need to grow up. Like, this is, how many times can we touch the iron or touch the stove and get away without completely burning ourselves? But Wolves, Mavs, no Luka. Wolves look terrible, play with their food for 46 minutes. I think it's worth also noting that game happened last night at the same time that the best team in the league, and I do think Boston is a slight tier right now above Minnesota, had to go to overtime to beat the 28 straight loss Pistons. Right. So I always try to add in a little like, oh, I know you're so frustrated with your team or what's going on. Like, take a step back, look around the league, and the Celtics almost lost to Detroit at home. So that's kind of.
I'm going to go out of order here for a second of what we did. I asked Kyle Anderson. This is at like the very end. We talked to Finch, we talked to Rudy, we talked to Ant, and then Kyle Anderson was the last one. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is bizarre. Like 85% of the questions or the answers were just negative and almost upset again. And so I asked Kyle about that after the game. I'll play that clip.
Kyle, mostly just an observation. You guys won this game tonight, but we've talked to 4 or 5 people now, and it's a lot of like, this is what we need to get better at. That's kind of been like a message, it seems like, throughout the season. Mm-hmm. How important is that?
What's that?
Just like you won a game or you're 23-7, but half the stuff we're talking about right now is stuff that can get better or almost needs to get better. Is it critical to kind of have that almost like glass half empty sort of look at it?
For sure. And I think that we're able to win these games, 23 of them so far, and not be playing our best. I think that's a good sign, honestly, because even with not playing as well as we should or not playing our best, we're still able to find a way to win, and that's what good teams do. They win the games they're supposed to. So we're going to get better. We're going to clean those things up, and we're going to get clicking at the right time. That's the goal right now. We just focus on getting better every day and trying to address those things and clean them up, and then it could get scary, once we finally figure it out, and it could get scary. So it's a good thing that we're winning these games, even though we're not playing as well as we could be.
And that's what I've been wanting to say all year. Is it seeing the ceiling, right? And I think they see the ceiling. I think Finch sees the ceiling, and he goes like, "What the hell? If we're playing offense like this, we are not going to reach the ceiling." And Kyle knows that, and Ant knows that, and Rudy knows that. And it's not that I think this is a positive group, actually, because they don't dwell on losses either. I think that's as big of a reason as any why they haven't lost 2 in a row this year. They got that goldfish, memory, right? It's like flush it out. But it is an interesting thing because they should keep that in mind. This could get scary. Who would argue that, right? There is room for this team to get better, just kind of doing sort of basic decision-making things that we know we've seen them do. They're just not all doing together. So I thought that was, I'm glad Kyle added that last part, because it sort of shifted my mentality of leaving there like, man, this is a weirdly angry 23-7 team, to being like, nope. They know that there's 52 more games, and they got stuff that they got to figure out if they want to be scary, because they know they can be. I appreciate Kyle saying that, but I also just appreciate that mentality, sort of the group, and we've given Finch credit for that. I think that starts at the top.
Yeah, and speaking of flushing goldfish, like, we do need to. I watched all these games last night at Buffalo Wild Wings, so I was able to monitor my favorite team while also watching Pistons, Celtics, and our Lord and Savior Joe Flacco. But the Pistons, if you watched last night, if you watched around the league, the Pistons played way harder than the Timberwolves last night. 2 different games, whatever. But they played way harder, and it didn't matter. And I think that's part of this whole, the Wolves don't have to play that well to win games. And when you cheer for a team, at least from a fan, like from my perspective, you're always kind of vibing with how the vibes of the team go when they win, victory Monday. When they lose, you're upset. But I don't think that's the case here. Like, I think fans can be like 23-7. They keep, look at all this. Look at first place in the West for the entire month of December.
Make a distinction between the people who are there, boots on the ground, and the people who are there that are.
You are there every day, boots on the ground. So I'm just going to throw that. I am probably at my happiest when the Wolves aren't that happy. Because I think when that team, those players, some of them that are still really young, so have some immaturity, or a little older, but maybe aren't as mature as I'd like, I don't love when this team is feeling themselves all the time. Because I think that's when you get some of the over-the-shoulder sling passes, heat check, bad 3. I'm I'm glad that this team isn't happy with their level of success because, again, as much as I'm like, oh, it's December 29th and they have less losses than the Vikings do, which that's never happened in 34 years. I don't want them to peak before New Year's, right? So we're going to say it once a pod because they're a sponsor, but like meat on the bone. But it's also bigger than that of like, I'm glad that they didn't come out of last night's game, a game that they played a Pistons level opponent without Luka. There's some good guys on Dallas and Tim Hardaway and some of those other guys, but I'm glad that they didn't come out of them like, yeah, whatever, we won. So I enjoy the energy from the locker room. I don't think it has to match my energy because, again, 23-7 is 23-7. But there were some things last night that made that game borderline unwatchable, and I think we'll get into it now. Some of the ways Carl was driving, I don't know if you have any of the Ant quotes. You want to get into those too? I didn't necessarily love some of the Ant quotes.
I sent you the Ant quote. It didn't get picked up on the video. I take the video from the Timberwolves YouTube channel. Shout out, appreciate that. It was the first question to Ant, but I have the quote here. The first question to Ant was, how did you go about trying to find offense and get into flow the way that you did tonight? And he said, just shoot it. I put in my mind before the game, like, I'm probably going to shoot it every time I touch it. So I came in with the mindset that whatever I was going to do, because I feel like last game I left bullets in the chamber. So I didn't want to do that this game. So Ant was just kind of came out and was like, I'm going to shoot. And after the game was saying, that's just something that I need to do. And I think that is going to sound counterintuitive to this clip that I'm playing from Finch. And I think Finch is in ways talking about Ant and being like, we need guys to stop driving into a crowd or just jacking up shots to do that. And he's talking about Ant and he's talking about Carl and he's talking about some other players on the team too. Though I think with the Ant piece, it's like he's your most prolific shooter, right? He's going to be shooting a bunch of shots and you need him to be able to do that. And Finch says that too in his answer of like, Ant got hot at first and we needed to fuel that, but we also needed to step back from it. Ant, and being 22 and young and still learning and all this stuff, he's in an interesting position here, I think, offensively with this team, where he's the best offensive player. They need him, but they also need him to play make for others and, create a positive offensive ecosystem. But that's difficult. It's difficult to be like the for everybody guy when also your role is to be the 20 shots a game guy. And I think that quote from Ant, juxtaposed against what Finch says is like, Ant, you're messing up here. But there is, you know what I'm saying there? There's this like sort of middle ground that Ant needs to navigate. And to the whole point here of like 52 more games to do it and figure this out and have it so the offense doesn't look like this. But I'll pay the Finch clip here. This is Finch, like right when he sat down for his press conference and you were like, okay.
You could tell right away. Yep.
This is the mood. Yeah, here's Finch.
60 from the field, 70 from three at halftime, and had 15 turnovers, And we're just, we're going places where there's nowhere to go. And it's, it's on us. And they're just bad decisions. And at that point in time, we deserve to turn the ball over because they're just not smart plays, So when we space and we make the extra pass and we, trust that it might come back to us, then we're good. We're really good. So, yeah.
You've made this a talking point all season, really, with them. Like, what do you think is not sinking in right now at that?
I mean, it's, I think everyone's a little, at times too worried about getting their own offense going. And, I mean, Ant had a hot start. So we got to ride that hot start. But then when that hot start's over, then you got to start making plays. And, other people, if they haven't touched the ball for a little while, they can't just decide that they're going to put their head down and go to the hoop, or they're just going to jack it because I haven't, shot it for a little while. And that's everybody, had done that at one point in time. I thought at the end of the second quarter, in particular, like, we all were having a pity party for ourselves offensively. And, there's a lot of ways to be immature, and generally this team's been very mature, but, we got to grow up offensively. It's time.
Is it disappointing when it's your best two offensive players who are leading the charge in that decision-making a lot of times?
Well, Yeah, we need them. You know, we're on them a lot to. They have great freedom, maybe too much, you know, and that's on me. But they have great freedom, but they have the responsibility to make the game easy for everybody. And you know, and you know, they'll do it. It's not all the time that they don't, but you know, when you have guys who are natural born scorers, sometimes if they're not scoring, they don't feel like they're impacting the game. But guys, you know, there's a lot of guys that can score and on our team, and you know, and we just got to, you know, 22 assists for a team that scores 118 points. And I know a lot were from the free throw line, but you know, that's we need to be upwards of 30. So yeah, we got a lot of work to do on the offensive end. So
I'll let you want to just respond to that.
Not a lot of people will like this, and he has flaws, and last year was his worst season. But that man is why I believe that this is sustainable, and he's probably the number one reason I have so much trust in all this, because I think behind the scenes, the stuff we don't see, that's not on Track the Pack, that's not reported by guys like you, is I think he holds these guys' feet to the fire and just doesn't let them be like, because again, the 23-7, this is awesome. But you also haven't done shit. Like a lot of you on this team haven't made it out of like the first round or done anything. And I think Finch is starting to get to that boiling point of, he's probably saying it behind the scenes. Ant was interviewed post-game by Rebecca Brunson, who did a great job, by the way. And one of the first things he said was that Finch texted me last night late and was like, you need to be better on defense. And I would love to just be a part of that group chat. Like, just like what you know what I mean? Like, is Ant playing video games? It's like 10-10, and Finch is just like, hey, man, bring the defense. And it worked for Ant, you know? Like, you saw him last night have a couple of those possessions. He had that block, and then he had like the steal, and then he got out in transition.
Yeah, there was like 4 or 5 of those. Yeah.
I don't think you talked about this with Britt. He's never going to probably be the two-way player that we want, just because I think it takes a lot of energy, and it's hard to be one of those guys. But when he does lock in for 3 or 4 possessions and takes it personally, he talked about not wanting guys to backpedal and all that stuff. But I just think it's cool that after a game, again, 23-7, you're still first in the West. You've done it all month. You're running the best team in franchise history. And Finch is, without literally saying Karl-Anthony Towns or Anthony Edwards, I took away from that clip him putting them on public blast of like, you know, trust the offense, involve your teammates more, because they were hunting. Like, you saw Ant come out last night early, and it was very apparent that like he is going to try to get 50, but in a way that was like, they needed it, right? They needed him to, 44 points on 23 shots is not nothing. But there were times where your natural basketball watching ability, I don't know if this was the same for you at the arena, but on TV, it's like, once a double comes, you're like, oh, now he's going to pass it to them. But he didn't pass it to them. He just keeps dribbling or trying to get out of it. And it's just like, fine. When he gets doubled, sometimes he just refuses to move the ball. Or with Karl, I haven't got a shot up in a while. I'm just going to drive into the lane. It's like, there's nowhere to go. The spacing is not good. The Kyle Anderson stuff, the Rudy Gobert stuff, we can get into that. But I thought it was cool, long-winded rant, that Finch just isn't going to let these guys be happy with what they're doing right now. And that's good, because that is, going back to what Kyle said, that's how this gets scary, right? If these guys buy in a little more and trust that extra pass and think, okay, if I swing it to the left, it'll work its way back to me. That is how you make a run in the playoffs. The way they played last night offensively, despite, 34 attempts from the free throw line and stuff, I don't think that wins playoff games in April and May. Mm-hmm. That's just my I think frustration.
I think Finch understands the pressure that Ant and Karl have as natural born scorers, like he said, and on the contracts that they're on, and the accolades and the recognition that comes with the points and the numbers and those sort of things. I think Finch gets it. Maybe this is like a weird side tangent, but I remember like the first year covering him, and obviously didn't know Finch all that well. And it was that takes over for Ryan, and it's that bad Wolves team. It's just a bad roster, right? And he said something, I'm going to kind of butcher this quote a little bit, but he talked about, how his job is to develop players and have team success, but is also, he said in that answer, part of his job is to put his players in position to have financial success down the road, whether that be here or not. I was like, I've never heard a coach say that, and particularly on a rebuilding team. I mean, he looked around at that team and he was like, all right, Jared Vanderbilt, Jordan McLaughlin, some guys like this who were kind of fringe NBA players who hadn't really got a contract or anything like that. He was like, part of my job is to make them believe and actually do this, that I'm going to put you in a situation that is going to help you grow and be able to stay in the NBA and make money too. That's a stated part of his view of what is required from him as a coach. And that's an interesting thing. And I think somehow these things are sort of related here too, where he knows there's that responsibility from Cat and Ant, but he also knows they can still get those numbers in a different way. Like there are adjustments to be made, and there's more. The more you trust your teammates, the more you do these things, the ball is going to come back to you, Ant, on the second side, where you're lethal. And I mean, Ant is that doesn't happen that often, but when the initial action happens and it's on the weak side to Ant, and they can't load up against it. I mean, that's one of the most effective looks in basketball, right? Where Ant can just explode to the basket past one person. Finch is like, you got to trust me that I'm going to put you in these situations to do that. And, with Carl kind of being banged up and Ant kind of being in the weird place coming back from the hip injury, it feels like those two have lost some of that. And I think that's what Finch's overall message is. And if he's using the media in any way to kind of, like you said, draw attention to this, he's just like, it's because he knows there's something better to be found here that actually not only aligns with team success, but also aligns with Cat and Ant's, individual goals. And to your point, I think that makes him a good coach.
Right. And that's my point, is just I don't know what Greg Popovich's relationship is with Jeremy Sohan. Like there's so much of the league that we cover and we think about on a daily basis, and we're so consumed that we still don't know. And I thought last night was cool because it gave you a glimmer or a peek into what Finch's relationship is with his best players behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Because I think Chris Finch, despite some of the offensive issues or the lack of timeouts in the past or whatever, I think he's smart enough to know that if I say this out loud, it's going to have like repercussions, or it's going to reverberate through this podcast. And he wanted that to happen. And I think he wanted to be like, I'm trying to get through these guys that everything you just said, like I am. Like, that's a real player's coach, by the way, right? Like, having a relationship with the players, but also be like, I want to put you on. You said Jordan McLaughlin, you said Jared Vanderbilt. I mean, he was here for most of Nas Reed's existence.
For sure.
And Nas got paid too. So I love all that. But again, this podcast is it glass half full, glass half empty? And I think from the player side and the locker room and everyone in it, it's probably a little glass half empty because they see what could still happen. And then for me, it's more of a glass half full at this moment, this sample size, but also kind of knowing that last night's game, great win, right? 118, 110. But that the way they played, the way Carl played, I mean, Kyle Anderson finally took a couple threes, hit a couple shots, but the way they're playing basketball right now offensively, and I'm sure you have some of the numbers, it's not sustainable. I think the defense is sustainable. I think we can be excited. You can jump on the bandwagon. If they keep playing offense like this, that's how they're going to get like upset in the first round type of stuff. So
no, that's real. And I think that's what Finch sees. And I think that's what some of the other vets in the locker room, or Kyle Anderson to that point, sees, is like, we need this to be better to reach the goal we have for this team, which is not just making the playoffs. You got something else?
Yeah. Well, you said something else that was smart. I just want to pick your brain. You said you think Finch realizes the offensive pressure that might be on a Carl and an Ant, right? Mm-hmm. And we're not going to do this today. We have 6 more weeks to do this. But one thing that's apparent after wins or after losses, it was very apparent in the OKC game. It was apparent last night. This team is 100% a player short. Yep. Like a player short. So when you flip the calendar to January, and the trade deadline, I think, is February 8th, this team has to make a move, in my opinion. It's no longer like, well, they could make a move. Mm-hmm. Their bench has a lot of guys that we probably have a Jake Scraft t-shirt of, Nas, Kyle, Nikhil, but they're not like a sustainable like every night they're going to be able to give you 15. And I do think Carl and Ant have a lot of offensive pressure on them to score 70, 75 a game, because the bench can just randomly on any night give you like 14 points between 4 dudes who played 120 minutes. Yeah. And it's not great. I mean, Shake Milton just doesn't play anymore. Nikhil does so many things that are awesome, but scoring's not always one of them. Nas will still give you a bummer of a night. Kyle's issues have been well stated, and it's like, okay, so then who do we go to? Like, do we have – if Mike Conley has to put up 20 a playoff game, that's another reason why you're like, holy shit, we need to get this addressed in the next 50-some games.
Right. We're long here on not taking a break, so we'll get that. But then let's move into the Kyle Anderson stuff, because I asked some questions about that after the game, and it's time to address that issue and acknowledge it at a minimum. So let's grab this first break here. Today's show is brought to you by Your Home Improvement Company, as our newest local sponsor, and I'm really hopeful that all of the local sponsors, in particular, you're considering, they're supporting us here. And we would love it if we could support them by generating business for them. So if you do have a home improvement project, whether it be a bathroom or new windows with winter coming here, please do consider Your Home Improvement Company. If you want to just check it out, it's yhic.com. If you want to call for a free consultation, it's 844-270-7180. And they are offering a deal through the month of December, which means you kind of got to act now. It's a free bathroom installation if you act in the month of December. No interest, no payments, nothing down till 2025. Again, if you're considering that, yhic.com or 844-270-7180. And then for windows as well, buy 2 windows, get 2 windows free. And those also come with no interest, no payments, nothing down until 2025. So if you are considering a bathroom project, or you do need to get your windows replaced, we just ask that you consider this company that is not only supporting this show, they're Wolves fans, and they're offering good deals on this stuff. So Your Home Improvement Company, 844-270-7180 or yhic.com. That's Your Home Improvement Company, where it's your home made better. All right, Kyle. The thing, and you sent this to me this morning. Again, let's shout out Jake Painting and Howls and Growls did a great video breakdown of this. And honestly, maybe just pause this podcast right now. Go watch that 8-minute video right now, because maybe if you did miss the Dallas game last night, or you haven't, it's been Christmas and you haven't been catching the Wolves as much recently, the Kyle Anderson being ignored on the perimeter thing is becoming a thing and a major issue for this Wolves group. They are just, again, ignoring Kyle in the corner, playing off of him. And it is just, when you're looking at the 15 turnovers from last night in the first half, which is a major problem. Yeah. Part of that is just like discipline and think, and like, let's make better decisions. There's no reason why this Wolves team should have the 3rd highest turnover rate in the league, only better than Detroit and Utah. There's no excuse for that. Part of that is just thinking and executing. But part of it, particularly, at least recently, like how many times, just think about this, like Sacramento, Oklahoma City, and Dallas game, how many times have Ant or Nas gone to the basket and just lost the ball? Like those weird, like you're going to the basket, the ball just like shoots out the wrong direction, like you press the wrong button on the controller. That's happening all the time with Ant and Nas. And part of that is them. It's controlling the ball, don't drive into the crowd. But the crowd is existing because they are loading up on these drives now. Just next game, watch Kyle Anderson's man, probably LeBron, and he is just going to sit right underneath the basket, and he is going to attack where the Wolves are trying to. He's going to defensively attack where the Wolves are trying to attack offensively. And it's becoming a major, for a while now, a major spacing issue with this team that they need to rectify. I asked Finch about that after the game, and he acknowledged it as part of the puzzle. But just first, I don't know how much you and I have talked about this. What is sticking out to you about this whole Kyle Anderson puzzle, which makes you simultaneously go, this dude can't play, and also realizing, what are the alternatives of who is going to play, and seeing the value he still does play. Like, some of the numbers aren't all that bad, even though it's painful, to the eye to watch him be ignored. Where are you just at with the Kyle Anderson having stopped shooting and the impact it's having on the offense?
Well, again, my left eye watched Wolves, Mavs, but my right eye watched Pistons, Celtics. And to answer your question, it makes me feel good, again, that when I watch the Pistons, if I'm a Pistons fan and I've lost 28 in a row, I'm like, is anyone on this team good? Like, is anyone on this team a keeper? Then I watch the Wolves, and I'm like, damn, I love all those guys, and I would love to take a bullet for any of them, and, like, none of them can be traded. But then you watch that 8-minute video, and again, shout out to Jake, who's a friend, it's, like, way more glaring when you just, obviously, when you break it down into an 8-minute, these are all the bad plays than during a game, but it's a real question, and it's probably partly what motivated my random October prediction of, like, they'll trade Kyle before the deadline. I think that has a lesser chance than when I said it, just because every time Finch talks about him, he sounds like it's like his nephew, and they love Kyle, and the defense has been great. But I'll throw it back to you. Kyle's defense has been great in spots where they can't trust Carl. He's in foul trouble. They need to play Kyle at the 4. Nas isn't having a game. Like, there are things that Kyle does defensively against bigger guys that are great. I've also said that he was one of the best Luka stoppers because they're both super slow. But the offense is so much worse right now that it's like, what we're getting on defense, maybe it's a B+, but on offense, he's a D-. And it's like, well, then the overall grade here is not good, and we have to look at it. So I don't know if I'm pro trading Kyle, because he also does some of the stuff that I enjoy off the court. Like, he is a veteran and he's a leader, and I think he'll tell you how it is. I always love the when you're going through hell quote, but I don't know. Like, that's going to be January. January would be Kyle Anderson month, because if he did take shots last night, right? Like, he did take 2 corner threes, but with his mechanics, he stepped on the line and one was a 2. But the way Jake shows it, it's like, he wants to pump and go, and he wants to get into the lane because then he can be creative. He has that little hook. He can throw lobs to Rudy. But now the lobs to Rudy aren't there because there's no threat of him scoring. And he can't even pump and go because no one's afraid of the pump. They're like, yeah, dude, please shoot. Like, you might not hit the rim. He
gets into, like, the spin so quickly because he's trying to create an advantage with the pump. That's not doing anything. So then he goes into it. It used to be last year, right? It was like the pump, get a step. They're going to catch up to him because he's slow, but you kind of take advantage of that.
Yeah.
Spin into the shot there. And now the only advantage point he has, or to create that separation to get the shot off, is the spin, but he's doing it from farther away from the basket, right? Because he needs it to get that initial separation. So it's not only that the spacing issues are hurting the team, the spacing issues based on the defender that's guarding him is hurting Kyle and his individual isolation game there too. He still is able to get the shots off, but that was, Kyle from that, like, floater range, that was a huge part of this team's offense a season ago, and how that weapon fused with Rudy Gobert made the Rudy Gobert minutes work last season pre-trade deadline. And I mean, it's pretty much the only minutes that worked last season with Rudy before they acquired Mike Conley. So it's this, and we've talked about this before, it's just this weird juxtaposition of, like, man, how many times last year did we call Kyle Anderson the Rudy Whisperer? And you remember all of that. And then you go, man, these are the toughest lineups right now, where it's Rudy, obviously not a spacer, and Kyle, who's clearly become not a spacer this season. And you're like, man, it almost makes you go, this great lineup a year ago, I'm not sure if they can play. I asked Finch about that after the game.
Kyle made a corner 3 in this game, but he hasn't been taking as many of those this season. And sometimes it seems in the lineups with Gobert that the spacing is an issue. And that was such a weapon for you guys last year, the Rudy and Kyle lineups. What's the key to maybe getting that offense back when those two are on the floor together?
Well, you have to, he played almost exclusively at the 4 for us last year. And this year he plays almost exclusively at the 3. So it's slightly different. We're fortunate enough to have, like, Cat or Nas out there who could space, and we can keep him in some of the same actions that we did last year when he was at the 4. But yeah, I mean, listen, we tell Kyle all the time, like, you know, you weren't brought here to make threes. Like, you're a basketball player, and you know, but we want him to stay confident in his shot. So yeah, it's also part of the overall kind of puzzle we got to figure out. But you know, I think with him, you know, we have him play everything. Sometimes he handles the ball, and sometimes he, you know, plays in the post, and so it's, you know, we just got to get a little bit more proficient at all of it.
That to me signals they're not going to be going away from this anytime soon. The solution in Finch's eyes is to find a better solution with Kyle. And I know it's easy to be watching this and to be doing the thing of like, okay, and I've done this. So I'm like, okay, could you play Jaden McDaniels at the 4 or something to go a smaller lineup that has more shooting? You know, there's Leonard Miller, there's Josh Minot, there's these sort of things. And what I would say to Wolves fans hearing that from Finch is that's not going to be his plan. His plan, the way I take it, is to continue on with Kyle and to, one, maybe just hope he regains some confidence in the 3. Maybe last night started that. But 2, find solutions that include him. Yes, what do you got?
Well, I had a couple things. First of all, when Finch says, again, no one is more pro Finch than I am, but when he says, well, last year he played exclusively at the 4, and this year he's playing exclusively at the 3, there's like some big Tim Robbins hot dog meme of like, we're all trying to figure out the guy that did this. It's like, well, you knew that, though, right? Like, you knew that when you traded for Rudy Gobert.
And man, did I not ask about that before? They were like, what was the answer? Because this goes back
yes,
to
I know
Memphis
you're the best.
Stuff. No. I'm just saying. I'm saying what was said is from Kyle. I asked Kyle and I asked Finch about this, and what they said back then was there's so much interchangeability between the 3 and the 4 in this that it's not going to be much of a difference, and it's proving to be somewhat.
Yeah,
of a
don't
difference.
lie to my face on that stuff, right?
No. And maybe they thought that. No, I don't think. I think they thought it was going to be more seamless with Kyle, and they're going off a 41% 3-point shooter Kyle last year. If you took last year's version of Kyle Anderson, who was confident and competent from the 3-point line, then him playing the 3 probably isn't the issue it is right now. And how were they to know that Kyle was going to go from his best three-point shooting season of his career into this, where he doesn't want to shoot them at all? I think this caught them by surprise. Probably even caught Kyle by surprise.
Yeah, and when we say, hey, we need to have a conversation, I want to be cognizant of the fact that I would imagine that this conversation started 2 weeks earlier inside that building, right? Like, they've probably been bringing this up. I don't know if there's a specific clip you have, but I saw last night where Kyle mentioned something about telling Ant and Mike, like, hey, like, trust me. Like, I'm gonna make some of these shots. And I think Kyle knows. And if Kyle knows, that's probably the biggest thing here, right? It's like, if Kyle is I preach self-awareness all the time. If Kyle is self-aware enough of like, hey, not only is me not even taking threes nuking our offense, but I don't know, in the back of my mind, it's like contract year Kyle too, right? Like, he does need to, sure. He is playing for another deal, and maybe his final deal, either whether it be here next summer or somewhere else. And you just could be the most amazing every other tool. But if you can't score or shoot in 2023, you just are limited now as what you can do and how much you can make and how many minutes you can play. So I think it's good that Kyle is starting to take him again. And it doesn't mean when I say, hey, we need to have the conversation that's like, we need to figure out how to trade Kyle. It might just be we need to figure out how to is there a way, the easiest way to staff an organization at most times is it's cheaper to hire from within than to hire from without. So if there's an easier way for them to just get 2022-23 Kyle back, perfect. There's your trade deadline. And go find one more guard, Lonnie Walker. But if you can't do it in January, you might just have to, give something up to get something. You might have to sacrifice, hey, Kyle's a nice emergency option on Jokic or some of these things, and just be like, hey, we're going to give up some defense because we're going to get something more in offense. Because right. Kyle Anderson, last night excluded, but like Kyle Anderson against the Thunder, Kyle Anderson against, I think, the Kings, that's the type of player, man, you watch so many playoff games, that's the type of player that just doesn't play in April, May, and June because teams just literally force him off the court and be like, no, you have to shoot. And if he can't make shots, the lineup, Dane, with Nikhil, Mike, Nas, Kyle, and Rudy is disgusting right now. It just has no pop. It has no, I mean, Mike's the best shooter out there. And it's like, well, I don't know if I want that all the time. So it's something they have to continue to figure out. I thought last night was a step in the right direction. I mean, he did also have like 10 rebounds, 3 assists. Like, he does other stuff.
Yeah.
But he did take a 3. Right? I know that's like very bars on the ground type thing, but let's see 2 more weeks of it. Let's see if he can, against the Lakers, take 3 threes or 2 threes, just to keep him honest. Because if he keeps him honest, and what'd you say, 41% last year, then it makes him one of the 3 or 4 most valuable players on the team.
I do think the self-awareness is big, and I'm not actually surprised to see Kyle Anderson sort of acknowledge that. He answered a few questions about the shooting, but he said in this clip that he knows he needs to prove it before he stops being ignored. Here's Anderson.
I think tougher for you to make those passes that you used to be able to make when people were coming out on you. Hitting a couple of threes is only going to make things better for you now, right?
No, because the Lakers are going to come in and allow me to shoot the ones in the corner as well. So I got to be able to knock them down, and I got to get to a point where it's proven. So I mean, exactly. So I'm ready to knock them down. I knocked them down tonight. I'm ready to shoot. I told Ant and Mike, trust me. I've been putting in the work, so I'm ready to knock it down. You guys.
I think Kyle, part of it is I think Kyle was going through this, I don't have this confidence in the 3. Can I make it work without it? And I think that's what he's been doing for the last month, is trying to find other ways to make it happen and work offensively. I feel like recently he's crossed over into the, I need to shoot these. And, there is not a middle ground, and probably to the playoff point from you, he's like, it has to be there in the playoffs, or I will, get played off the floor. And so leaving last night with what Finch said and what he said, and Finch is going to give him the freedom and the autonomy he's not going to force him to shoot him. But I think Kyle is going to do more with the green light that he has from there than he has been doing. And that might be a lot of misses here coming up, but my guess would be we're about to see the volume of those threes going up, because I think Anderson crossed some sort of point where he was like, all right, I got to do this. I got to get over it, and I just got to start taking these.
And that might be all we need. Honestly,
Yep.
that might be the prescription, is just a self-awareness, a realization of, if I don't start to take these, even forget the result. If I don't take the shot, I'm going to lower the percentage chance that I'm going to have an impact in the playoffs. And when all those games are on TNT and ESPN, it's going to lower my chance at getting paid again. And I know that some people are probably scoffing, do you think Kyle's thinking about getting paid last night? It's I bet you'd be surprised how often guys in contract years think about their contract that's coming up. Yeah. So if he all of a sudden is DNPing in the first round against the Nuggets or against, the Mavs or something, that's a really big issue, and that's how you become Malik Beasley signing a minimum contract in the summer. You know what I mean? So I think this is all intertwined. To go back a step, because you mentioned something, and the theme of this pod, I guess now, is winning. I don't know. Is winning good? Should we be happy that they're winning?
I do have my 5 things that this
I
team
didn't
has been really well.
We won't get to those.
I will get to those soon.
But no, for the, they're 23-7 again. I do have a little criticism of Finch and stuff. Yes, the first thing they should do is just continue to throw Kyle out there, see if he can just organically solve some of his issues, which then will allow Jake Painting to make better videos of okay, it's been fixed. But one of the things I think about when they're banking all these regular season wins, one of the side benefits, and I don't think this team will do it, and it's a real frustration I have, is that come January, come February, when you're either a little more banged up or you're trying to maybe have one eye out for a playoff and getting guys rested and stuff, they should be giving a Leonard Miller a chance, right? I know that we're in this 16-game stretch and I know all this stuff, but when you play the Pistons and the Nets in back-to-back games in January, why wouldn't you at least experiment with some of that stuff? And that's, again, maybe it's champagne problems, maybe you totally disagree, but one of the things that I struggle with is they should continue as they're racking up wins and hey, man, the Pistons played harder than us, but we just win because we're talented. is to find little creative ways to be like, well, what would happen if Leonard Miller took those minutes for a night? Or what would happen if we actually gave
what if Leonard Miller's understanding at 19 years old of what conceptually they're trying to do on both sides of the floor is a 1 out of 10? And I don't know that. We all know very little
and
about
it probably is, but I would like to know.
That's what I'm asking. I'm asking if you were Chris Finch and you knew that Leonard Miller's understanding of what they're trying to do is a 1 out of 10, would you still play him like you're saying they should?
I love Chris Finch, but I also think sometimes the coaching staff, the front office, whatever, gets a little stubborn of like, I think they thought Shake Milton was a backup point guard.
Yeah, no, that part's fair. It's like, yeah, you can counter.
So I'd like to see it, right? Like, okay, you see him, and this is Jaren Hall with the Vikings, right? Like, why didn't he play early? It's like, I don't know, man. They see him every day at practice. You know, like we don't see it, they see it. Mm-hmm. Maybe they see Leonard Miller and shoot around and practice, and like he's 1 out of 10. He's not there yet, but he's 19.
Yeah,
2 years from now he'll drink and he'll play. But I'd like to see it because I've seen some of the other things that they were like, we're going to unlock Rudy. No, you're not. We're going to make Shake Milton our backup point guard. It's like, that doesn't work. So I'd like to see them at least experiment with some of this stuff. And again, I know this is a side tangent, but I watch other teams that are contenders, and I think the Nuggets last year on their run, they had some Pistons level losses. They were, it didn't affect their trajectory of winning a title, but I remember them experimenting with like a 4-guard lineup or doing little things to just be like, well, let's just literally throw shit at a wall for 8 minutes and see if it sticks. And that is like a side benefit of winning all these games that maybe you shouldn't win, is it gives you a little more of a runway to experiment. So I know it's weird that we went from Kyle Anderson to Leonard Miller, but
no, it's not according to my mentions.
Well, you just got to mute me then, because I'm sorry I keep replying to you. But I think it's just the answer is Kyle. And because I was just checking Twitter, and like I already had 4 people send me Tyus Jones trade offers, and we'll get into all that in January. Will be a big trade month, but I really believe that the easiest way to solve some of this stuff would just to tell Kyle, hey, we do trust you. You want us to trust you, like we'll trust you in reverse, and just let it fly a little more, because he was outstanding last year. But I don't know. I keep coming back to that little Finch quote about how last year he played at the 4 and this year's at the 3. It's like, well, you knew that in October.
Yeah.
So if you know Leonard Miller's a 1 out of 10 on the able to understand all the defensive stuff, where are you at from like, do you really think Kyle can get back to an 8 out of 10 playing at the 3 or not? And I don't have the answers to this. It's just questions that come up that.
No. This is the stuff that we don't and can't know, is Leonard Miller's understanding of what to be doing out there. And I'm, I threw out a 1 out of 10. It's probably not that, right? I will say this though. If Leonard Miller's understanding is 1 or 2 out of 10, and Josh Minot's is 5 out of 10, I would play Josh Minot over Leonard Miller. Even if
that's
Leonard
fair.
Miller, Do you get what I'm
asking for
there?
any of, again, Tim Conley should be allowed to basically fight anyone that criticizes the Rudy Gobert trade right now, because it has clear. I mean, this is another podcast.
Punch Britt in the face last night.
the 2 best teams in the Western Conference were essentially built by Tim Conley. Like, he should maybe be talked. That should be talked about a little bit. Yeah. I know that the Nuggets had some other moves, but Tim Conley built the Nuggets. They're in second, and he built the Wolves, and they're in first. But he also has gotten essentially one good half of Wendell Moore guarding John Morant out of his last 2 draft class, and I would just like to know if any of them can contribute, because everything's peachy right now, and we're all great, but I keep coming back to, like, if Mike misses a playoff game, what's your option? You know, like if you do lose a big guy, like, do you have a backup? So, yes, 23-7, and I'm harping for Josh Minot minutes, but I don't know, man. Like, that's just what other good teams do. Like, the Celtics have, I don't know his name, you do probably, this big guy that's on like a 2-way.
Nemias Keita?
Yeah, and he just does cool stuff. He'll probably never play in the playoffs, but they're experimenting with him while being the best team in the league. And I want, like, that's my biggest gripe right now with the Wolves, is just seeing what other ways they can acclimate with guys on the roster. I mean, I've been pimping them out as the deepest team in the league, and I think that still. But if you're not going to even look at 6 or 7 of the guys on your bench, then it's like, okay, then we don't have the answers here. And then we do have to start calling other teams and floating out some of the assets we still have left, like these second-round picks, to make an improvement. Because without a doubt, I still look at this team and I think, you want to know what's weird? Do you know what this team? Do you want to know what this? I'll let you get back to actually having a structured podcast. Do you know what this team misses? Like the one position role that I think this team would just need.
Oh, go for it.
Jalen Noel.
No, it was.
But you know what I mean? Like they just need like a guard that can,
a
that can
better
just
one.
get a right. But like that's why I said Lonnie Walker. Like they just need a guard that can come, not Bones Highland. I just need a guard that can come in and give him a couple buckets because I don't know, back to the pressure thing.
If you believe this though, like you need to open. If you believe that to be the type of player that this team needs, I think you need to open up to Bones Highland. Like
okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Like I don't get.
I think it's because he's been buried on.
Player. Yeah, he's gonna be buried. They're only gonna be able unless they trade Kyle Anderson.
Yeah,
that's a separate thing. It's going to be a player that's making like no money, so you can trade Wendell Moore and a couple picks for him, seconds or something, or Shake Milton or something like that. And so, we talked about whatever that was a few weeks ago when we started thinking about trades. I was like, yeah, like Malik Monk would be perfect on this team. Well, there's no way in hell that's happening. Like. That it's so you're trying to find discount Malik Monk, not dollar store Malik Monk, which is Jalen Noel, but like you're trying to find something in between those two that you can acquire with the salaries that you have in hand. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it's for sure going to be Bones Highland, but that is that archetype, and that is a player who, because he is buried on that team, maybe is very attainable.
And this is, I know as we're trying to draw connections, this is all connected because there's a Kyle Anderson thing off the bench. And last week I said to you, hey, if I told you that everyone's healthy, they played a normal rotation, and Carl scored 30, what would you say? And you say, well, they won the game. That's just, like if Carl scored 30, they probably won. I have this new one where it's like, if I told you everyone played, but Nas didn't score double digits, you'd be like, well, shit, they probably better got 40 from Ant.
Yeah,
and they did last night.
Right.
But it's just, Jaden, I want more from him, but when he does give you a little, it is efficient. I mean, he did have double digits last night. The Rudy thing, maybe this would be a good time to just squeeze this in, but like Rudy was awesome, right? And he was their third scorer last night with 20 points. 7 for 7 from the field, 6 for 7 from the free throw line. It eliminated the ability to like foul him and, send him to the free throws. But I don't know. It's just things I'm thinking about as this team banks up wins and all these pieces are connected. It's like Kyle is the biggest thing right now that might unlock some of this stuff. I thought Carl last night, again, 2 games removed from his injury, but he was just square pegging, round holing every time he got the ball, driving into 3-4 guys. But again, it's connected because Kyle was out there and there was no spacing, or he's out there with Rudy. Or it's like, well, he has to be out there with Rudy. That's what this whole franchise is built on right now. So there's a lot of questions. And I'm sure you and the smarter people will get into them over the next month, but it's still glass half full on my end. But there are some things of like, do we unlock some of the guys on our bench as we get colder in January and February and we have to grind through wins? Because now you're in it now, right? After Christmas, these next 6 weeks are the biggest grind of the season, and then it'll kind of perk up as teams get closer to the playoffs. So a lot of questions, not a lot of answers yet, but yay, Wolves.
Well, so like you said, the theme of this has been, glass half empty, right? And that came from, the locker room in the post game last night. There is still water in the glass. And that's why I wanted to do this. I texted her. I'm like, I'm going to do 5 things that they're really good at, that they've been really good at this year. Because there is that water in the glass that is buoying, this team to the level that they're at to be 23-7. So grab another break here and then come back and talk about 5 things this team's done really well. All right, Kyle. You mentioned Jaden McDaniels off the top. I put together this list fairly quickly, but I was just thinking of 5 things that this team has had a lot of success doing this year. And obviously I wanted to push myself to find some that weren't just defense related, right? We kind of know that. And one thing this team has done really well is score when Jaden McDaniels is on the floor. And he has the highest offensive rating of any rotation player on the team. And particularly in the minutes with Cat and with Ant, they have an offensive rating over 120 in those, which is where it should be with Cat and Ant. But the only player combination that is allowing them to get to that point is when Jaden is on the floor with them. So, this isn't like a new thought necessarily. It's Finch says all the time that McDaniels is kind of a barometer for the success of the offense. We've been talking about through Jaden's injuries and stuff like that his re-inclusion should open up some things offensively, cutting and doing that. And I just wanted to point out that the numbers do indicate that. Your thoughts?
I thought maybe I could hear from my favorite player. No, I'm totally with that too. And someone described Mike Conley the other day to me as like he's their sober driver or their DD, because this team can get a little weird and stuff late game, and Mike's this stable force that will get you home safely. But Jaden's a little bit of that too, right? Like I don't know, he's been a little fiery. I don't know if it's just frustration with the whistle or whatever, but offensively when he's out there, everything that you have on the screen right now is like eye test as well, right? Like they just seem more balanced because, again, I don't know, like Nickeil can hit threes, Nickeil can give you some buckets, but Jaden is just such a higher floor for his offense. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about this 9 different ways, but it just leads to some frustration on my end too of the organic way to staff this team and this organization would be maybe just try to have Jaden be a little more involved offensively, right? Like just be like, hey, Jaden, you don't get to eat unless you take 12 shots type stuff, just basic things like that. Because as you're showing on the screen, when he's out there, the offense is it just levels up, right? It doesn't really matter. I mean, what you're showing doesn't really matter who else is out there as long as Jaden's out there.
You know what's interesting though? So Jaden has the best offensive rating of any of the Wolves rotation players. He also has the worst defensive rating. And part of that is they played really well defensively in the games that Jaden didn't play. I take that to mean a real opportunity here. Mm-hmm. Like the idea that the offense is better with Jaden on the floor is intuitive to me. I think that's true. The idea that the defense is at its worst with Jaden on the floor makes no sense, which to me says this is a product of a weird and still kind of small sample size. Mm-hmm. So I would say this 111.4 defensive rating that the team has with Jaden on the floor is probably going to settle back down into the team's average at least, which is 108.1, which is the number 1 defense in the league. And I believe that offense could hold some. So it's not just the additional positive impact of Jaden's offense. The defense over time, I think, is going to get better. And then at that point, he ends up being one of the players with one of the best net ratings on the team, meaning you're just winning those minutes more and more. So I thought that was an important one to just acknowledge, as Jaden's still clearly figuring it out some too now, right? And in who he is, what he is, how's his body feeling, where does he fit into all of this? I just think it's encouraging and noteworthy to say that they're playing offense really well comparatively with Jaden McDaniels on the floor. I'll stay on the offensive theme. Another thing this team is doing really well this season, despite being the 17th offense in the league, is shooting. They have the 5th best effective field goal percentage in the NBA. It's like slightly above average from 2, mid-range, at the rim, those sort of things. They have been a lethal three-point shooting team. Only Miami has a better three-point percentage than the Wolves this year. The Wolves have made 42.4% of their threes from the corner. That's awesome. Average is 39.3 in the league. And they've made 38.3% of their above the break threes. Average in the league is 36.2. This has been a good three-point shooting team. Not necessarily a volume three-point shooting team, but overall, when they shoot and don't turn the ball over, which again, they do way too much. 3rd most in the league, only better than Detroit and Utah. And that's not a good list that you want to be on right there. If they're not turning the ball over, they can get buckets. They can efficiently score when they can get to a shot. And that's something they've been doing all season. We look at the offensive rating, and that's how we normally grade this. And you go, all right, the Wolves are 17th in offense. They're a below average offensive team. They're not a below average shooting team. They're a below average offensive team because they turn over the ball so much. I'm really happy you brought that up, because just eye test would have never believed it. Because I would have just said, I don't think this team is a very good shooting team. Right. But again, that's literally like just watching it and stuff. And maybe I'm focusing more on what you said, the volume, that they still don't have a high volume. Oh, and that's like a must to change, obviously. And we talk about that with Carl all the time. Like, there you go. Come on. 3 more of those a game. Easy.
And that
part of the solution.
This goes back to way too much analysis of Celtics Pistons, but man, the Celtics just let it fly. All 5 of their guys will just, their ideal 5-man lineup is just all dudes spacing the floor. So they're playing, and if you do have 1% thought about what this team could look like in a playoff run or against some of the other league's bests, that's just like basic math now of how you'd get beat by the Celtics. It's just they're taking more volume threes. Sure. But it is interesting, and I did not know that, the more you know, that this team, when they do take threes, is really efficient at it. Right. And it does just highlight what Micah Norrie said last night at halftime, that this team just turns the ball over way too much.
Yeah. The other offensive thing I have that this team has been doing really well over the course of the season is big guy stuff. Post-ups, 77th percentile, like in terms of points per possession and post-ups. Pick and roll man offense, where the ball, gets to Carl on the pop or Rudy on the roll, 80th percentile. And then offensive rebounds and putbacks, 80th percentile as well. And, those aren't glaringly positive percentiles there. But again, what is this overall? 43rd percentile offense. That is the areas where they are being an above average offensive team, is in the situations that they impose their size. Again, the volume of that could go up, right? Could we, I know Nas just picked up a foul a minute last night, but I'm sitting there watching another team go small against this team. I'm like, let's roll up Nas in the post for a post up here. They need to impose more of these things. Carl needs to get deeper. They need to find Rudy on the roll. Rudy needs to go through the smaller guys on the catch in that situation. And this team can do it. They have enough effective interior offense. They just need to impose it. The book after this last week is going to be go small against this team. That's what they're going to do. They're going to start going small.
The Thunder did that better than like anyone, right? Maybe. Mm-hmm. And you went an hour and a half with Britt, so I don't need to go anymore. But it was funny because in the moment, I'm like watching that Thunder game and you're tweeting, you're like, yeah, I don't know if Rudy and Carl can work in this matchup. And I was like, well, so they're going to sub one of them out and go small. And then Nas subbed in.
I know. I remember that.
Right? So it's like, I was like, okay, we got to take one of the big guys off the court. And then Finch was like, watch this. And then he's going to throw another big guy out there. And then all of a sudden, like, Luka Garza took his pants off. So it's just weird that was the way they did.
Chinos or something.
Yeah, his tearaway pants. Sorry, but no, I'm with you on that. I think when they do go big, but that's another thing to just put a pin in, right, for the next 50 so games is when teams dare you to go small, and you decide, screw it, we're going to go bigger. What wins? What wins out, right? Because if you're stubborn and you're like, no, we're going to play 3 bigs now or whatever, and it doesn't work. And this ties back into like the Rudy Gobert press conference of July 2022 is like, Finch is adamant, in this front office and this team, this organization is adamant that we're not going to let other teams tell us how we're going to play. Yep. And what did you call this category? The big guy stuff? The big guy stuff shows that they can do big guy stuff and win some games. But just another, I don't know, no analysis. Just I'll continue to monitor that moving forward, that there are times where I'm like, oh, this team went small. I wonder if Finch will counter. And he's like, no, actually, he'll just back all the F-250s out there and be like, let's see what happens.
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of be tracking that going forward for the next couple of weeks of how much do teams decide to lean small against this team. I think we know in the playoffs with a lot of the matchups, like the Clippers would go small against them. The Thunder just are small. I think it's interesting, if you like Phoenix, right? Mm-hmm. And Nurkic is one of your 4 good players. Do you go to the point where you're like, nope, we're going to go small. We're going to take our 4th best player off the floor to go small because we think it's that problematic for the Wolves if we just put Josh Okogie and Karl Anthony Towns and we let Durant guard Gobert and we just switch 5 and hope that they bog themselves down into isolation, like the Wolves did last night against Dallas, who by necessity kind of started playing that way, and when they had Dwight Powell on the floor and we're switching 5. It's an area that this team needs to get better at, is punishing, these smaller lineups. The big guys can do it. Rudy can, Carl can, Nas can. You just need to do it when the opportunity presents itself. And if I have a big knock on these last 2 games against the Thunder and the Mavs, is those guys didn't do that. Rudy. Rudy kind of did. Like we said, he was 7 for 7 from the field, 20 points, and a lot of that was the offensive putbacks. But what was the what did the Wolves do at any point in that game last night that used size and skill? That didn't happen. And that has to happen if a team's going to go that small against them. But this was supposed to be a positive thing.
Yeah,
broadly,
give me another. Yeah, no, that was big guy
broadly.
stuff. Keep doing big guy stuff.
The defensively, it's just worth noting this is the best half-court defensive team in the NBA, and that's been getting slightly worse over this like last 10 games. So they've been starting to play, better teams. But the gap between the Wolves at number 1 and the Clippers at number 2 in half-court defense, right? We're just removing transition here. The gap between the Wolves and the Clippers is as big as the gap between the Clippers and the number 10 team. So it's one of those situations where saying the Wolves are the best half-court defensive team is actually underselling it. They are noticeably the best half-court defensive team. And then the other defensive thing I have is statistically, and you look at the tracking data, is where I'm getting this from, they've done a great job defending pick and rolls when the ball handler shoots. The guy coming off of that. You look at some of just the overall defensive pick and roll numbers for this team, and it's not very good, more average. And that's because the bigs are hurting this team in pick and roll. We saw Holmgren do that. We talked about that yesterday. Sabonis did that in the Kings game. The Wolves have done a really good job, 90th percentile, third in the NBA, of defending the ball handler when they come off of a pick and roll and go and try and score. Obviously, a ton of that is Rudy there, but it's not exclusively Rudy. Nas and Carl were doing a good job of that, particularly earlier in the season. And that should give you some confidence against, a really good point guard who's running pick and roll a lot, is that, yeah, we can stop this with Rudy Gobert and a combination of Karl Anthony Towns and Naz Reid. So those are 5 things that this team has done really well for the entirety of the 30 games. I just think that's important to be acknowledging this stuff whenever we do have a game like last night where it's a win and the majority of our analysis or the players' analysis or the coaches' analysis is, to nitpick or to be frustrated. Something's getting them to be 23-7, and those are 5 of the things.
Can I give you a bonus one?
Yeah.
Because I had a friend, Derek, last night who, last night was, I would imagine, a big game for tickets you got for Christmas. The Wolves are at home. They're playing the Mavs. Luka Doncic is on the LeBron spectrum right now of, like, when he's in town, I got to watch him. Like, Wemby was in Portland last night. A lot of friends went to that. I enjoy that the Wolves play their guys. And it's going to bite them in the ass at some point on the second night of a back-to-back where you're like, if Mike Conley rolls an ankle or Kyle gets hurt or something, you're like, oh, why didn't they just rest those guys? And we'll do some hindsight stuff. But when you look around the league, I think Jace had a pretty good tweet about like the All-Star Timberwolves ticket package that they sold to be like, hey, come watch these 10 games against these All-Stars. And so far, 3 of those 4 games, the All-Star hasn't played. It seems like the in-season tournament was years ago. Right? Like, oh, man, look at that. Everyone's trying and everyone's playing and stuff. And like, that was 2 weeks ago, and now everyone doesn't play. Yeah. And I just, I selfishly get to go to Wolves games now for free and cover them with a credential. And like, I don't have to pay money. And I feel fucking sick for people, Wolves fans, anyone that has to go watch these games now and these guys just aren't playing. And I commend the Wolves, if nothing else. Maybe it's a culture thing, whatever, that if these guys have 2 legs and 2 arms, they're going to get out there and suit up and try. So I don't know. That has nothing to do with what you just said, but I commend that. It also helps the analysis of all this stuff, right? Like, we've seen this starting 5 or these guys play probably more than most teams. And it's like, we have a lot of sample size now to dissect. I mean, I saw
you know who that helps too is like Finch
and Tim Connolly.
Yeah. Of like knowing what, like we've done this plenty of times before in other seasons where the Wolves were tanking or injured, where, you're doing the lineup combination thing that we were just doing a few minutes ago. And you're like, yeah, well, a lot of the minutes when Covington played next to Towns was before 7 guys got traded off the team. How relevant is that? Like, there are disadvantages, to playing. And there's a reason why these teams are sitting Wemby or Luka or whoever, right? It's in the name of like sustainability, but there are positive externalities outside of the obvious ones of like, it increases your odds of winning night to night if you're playing your best players. If the Wolves can continue to play the best players throughout the season, they'll have a better understanding of what lineup combinations work, of counters against teams that go small, counters against teams that go zone, those sort of things, to know like, oh yeah, we faced Dallas back at the end of December. What do we do in that game where they just decided to switch 5 the whole time? We had our full complement of players. So it makes sense to go back and look at. And I think I guess that's another thing they're doing really well, because that's helpful.
But it's a glass half full thing too, right? I think of the Phoenix Suns. They, at some point, like, they really need to get those 3 guys on the court together to see, like, does it work playing Bradley Beal and Devin Booker together? And the inability for the Wolves last season to really get an idea of, does this work? I mean,
that's probably part of the reason too, where they're like, oh, we didn't really get the chance to learn anything last season.
And you don't have as long of a runway now to learn this stuff, right? With Kevin Durant's already 1 foot out of the desert. So you gotta, it's important that these guys, I mean, just from a fan experience, that's kind of my thing, is that if you're paying money, these ticket prices are outrageous. And it's like, if you go, you want to watch not only your favorite team that shows up, but you want to watch the other team's best players. And I would imagine that LeBron plays on Saturday for the Lakers at Target Center. That game should be wild. I think it's like his birthday or something. I'm sure he's going to get 40 free throws. But I think it's cool from a fan perspective that the Wolves are playing their guys, but it's also big from a basketball perspective because
I like that you brought that up.
Also, and the only other thing I had, because I mentioned the phrase All-Star ticket package, I don't know if you thought about this, but I saw someone, there's like a CBA, not CBA, but Finch is probably going to coach the All-Star team. Yeah. Have you thought about that? Because
Rudy was asked about that last night. He was asked about All-Star. That's the first thing he said. I want to be the number 1 seed so Finch can coach it.
But if they were the number 2 seed behind Denver, I think Finch would still coach it, because I don't think you can have the same coach 2 years in a row. So I think Mike Malone is already like booked to Turks and Caicos. But for Finchy, like, I don't know. I would imagine Finch also just doesn't want to do that. It doesn't seem like the way
I'd want that dude to take a nap for like 5 days.
I knew they were going to win last night because they showed him before the game, and his hair was he had his best hair game last night. It looked different and disheveled after the game. But I was just thinking, like, man, how weird is this? Because now we're getting into like vote for the All-Stars and a lot of promotional stuff. And I was, will Ant make it? Will Carl make it? Will Rudy make it? But I think Finch has the best chance to make it, and that's. Yeah. I can't imagine that man wants to do anything less than spend all weekend getting interviewed and doing marketing things in Indiana.
Kyle, let's wrap this episode up with a Prize Picks segment. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. PrizePicks.com or the Prize Picks app. We have a $100 promo code, which is Dane. If you want to create an account, maybe your fantasy football team got knocked out of the playoffs last week, but you're still going to be watching football this weekend. We have Prize Picks has plenty of different picks out there, more or less TDs, receiving yards, rushing yards, passing yards. There's a million different things. I really just recommend going to prizepicks.com and checking it out. If you spend more than 5 minutes looking through it, I guarantee you're going to find 3 or 4 that you're like, well, this seems like the side of this proposition that I want to be on. I know it's something that YouTube most nights. You sent me a screenshot last night.
Shout out to Jace. Shout out to Jace.
Yes. What do you have this week for Prize Picks? Is anything you're looking at the NFL slate?
Yeah, I mean, again, in the spirit of the holidays, I'm trying not to pick anyone because I don't want them to tear an ACL. But I just want to go back over, if you're on the screen, like the demons and goblins thing. If you find a player on an NFL entry that has a little red demon emoji next to it, it just kind of increases the odds even more. So there's fun ways to like in Dallas, Detroit this weekend, which should be, probably high scoring game, 2 teams indoors, throw Amon-Ra St. Brown and Brandon Cooks into a little 2-person entry. And I think if you have to click more, but I think it pays out like 8 to 1.
6 to 1,
or 6 to 1 there. So there's fun little ways. Prize Picks, I think, not only do they support us, but they also have continued to innovate, and the app's really easy. And I always say this because it's important. Like, it's easy to get your money out. And if you're gambling, that's probably what you're trying to do. So please bet responsibly, all that stuff. But Prize Picks is really fun. And this is a loaded weekend of football because there's no more buys. Fantasy championships, you're probably out of it like I am. But there's no Monday night game too. So Sunday's a loaded day of football. You'll be recovering from Wolves Lakers. And Prize Picks is a cool way to have a little skin in the game and something to monitor.
100%. Yeah. And that's what we just say is it's like, particularly with some of these like amplifier ones now too, where it's, it is 6 to 1, or you can find a if you do enough in there, you can give yourself a 10 or 15 or 20 to 1 there too. And to that end, it's like, yeah, are you going to hit a bunch of those? No, but it is fun, and if you're just doing it for $5, to have that 20 to 1 thing going into Sunday, and you're like, well, if these 4 things come together and happen, my $5 turns into 100. And it's, we're not suggesting this to be something that you go and become, a side hustle like full tilt poker or something. but it's fun and it's fun. And like you said, we'll be watching a game one night and you'll send me a screenshot of you're like, I need 7 more points from Jaylen Brown or something like that. And it's just, I just think it's a fun thing to do. I'm really just, I'm grateful to have this type of sponsor.
Yeah,
that's
there's nothing better
a fun
than
thing to talk about too.
There's nothing better than when you need 2 more Garrett Wilson yards to win $300 and you're yelling at Trevor Siemian to stop throwing down to running backs. Like that's when you probably should take a step back. But
Right.
Easy to use. Again, Dane's promo code is awesome. Give it a shot. Low limits. You can bet $5. There's always different Taco Tuesday, and today it's like Flex Friday where you can bet up to $20 to get your money back. So cool ways to have a little in NFL playoffs, or as the basketball season turns around. They have all sports. They have season-long things, NHL. So really cool sponsor. Always appreciate them, and thanks for supporting those that support us.
Absolutely. PrizePicks.com, PrizePicks app, promo code Dane. All right, Kyle, we did it. We went long again here too, but you got something?
Well, I just had a note because there's nothing really to talk about, but it came out yesterday, and you didn't. I think it came out while you were recording with Britt. But Woj had the kind of announcement that Mark Laurie and Alex Rodriguez are continuing what we thought would happen, and that they are going to exercise the ability to acquire, I think it's another 40% or whatever. So I don't really know what you talk about there, because there's not really, it's just kind of, we've had Dan Bowling on.
Nothing went wrong.
But it's another thing to put a pin in, because it seems like, and you know more than I do, but it seems like things are continuously progressing the way that you would hope they progress, and nothing really fun to talk about now, but it will be something to monitor, because those people that Woj tweeted out their photo will be the people that ultimately decide if this thing is sustainable and it works. Are we going to pay to keep it going? So,
Totally.
I don't know, just something to monitor as we get into January, February, March, and April.
Yeah, massive subplot in the bigger picture story of the Minnesota Timberwolves for a bunch of reasons. Yeah, we talk about the tax thing all the time, and do they do the one time? Do they hit the second apron one time and do it next season? The only 2 people who know that are Mark Laurie and Alex Rodriguez. They're going to be making that decision there. There's other big macro impacts on a new stadium, those things. I mean, this is the Minnesota Timberwolves have always been a big part of the state. And now that they're good and better, it's going to only become a bigger and more important thing in our community, and the people who are pulling the strings on that at the very top are Mark Laurie and Alex Rodriguez. And we've had a lot of over the course of the past, 2+ years now, going like, what is this going to look like? Are we going to get to the finish line? And, particularly early on, like hand raised, I was skeptical about all of it, but here we are, like at the finish line, to make this final payment. How it works is you activate this call option, which they did, and that gets you your Woj tweet that's happening. You make the actual payment at the end of March. You've just signaled that you are going to make it, and if they make it at the end of March, and I think that's the amount of time they have to actually get the dollars over there, then they become the majority owners in the team. They own 40% of it right now, and this last payment is for an additional 40% to get up to 80%. And all signs point to this. I mean, I said back in the summertime when I was asking around about this, that this is going to get done in December, and the payment will be made quickly thereafter. So what we've been hearing has at times been confusing, but what we've been hearing lately has played out, and it looks like we're here. It's the Mark Laurie and Alex Rodriguez, scenario, and Glenn Taylor's time here is coming to a close in terms of his majority ownership.
It's a lot of lasagna.
It's a lot of lasagna.
$1.5 billion worth of lasagna.
The new valuation, did you see that in the Sportico article? The new investors are investing in at $2.1 billion. So
weird. I think there was this dumb kid who covers the Wolves who had that like 18 months ago. I wonder who that was. He's Dane. I'm Kyle.
You guys didn't do Flagrant Howls this week, correct?
No, Flagrant Howls took a week off, which is probably why some of the straight voltage came back. I'm sure my co-host Phil Mackey can't wait to dive into some of that with the Carl. Just a tough week for Carl. I don't know. He came back from an injury and it didn't look well, but I just imagine he's not fully healthy up to speed, literally. So it'll work. But no, we'll be back next week and we're going to be have some guests on, but appreciate everyone that was supportive of us taking a little time off over the holidays. It felt good to not tweet for like 5 days. But when we get through the new year, it's going to be, I mean, like I said, it's 6 weeks to the trade deadline. And then there's this really fun back-to-back out here in Portland that I know you're coming to. And then it's like the All-Star break. And then all of a sudden it's March and everyone's going to be like,
pick up.
It's time for the Wolves to be done. It's like, nope, actually it's just getting started. We might be doing this till June and never ends. So content aplenty, but appreciate everyone that gave us a little break.
Yeah. Next up will be we're not going to do anything off of the Lakers game on Saturday, but Chris and I are going to record on New Year's Day. He's going to be in New York. It's a 2 p.m. game. So we're going to record that night on Monday night after he gets back from the stadium. So early Tuesday morning, the next episode will be up, and Chris and I will probably focus on that Knicks game and have some stray voltage from the Lakers game there as well. Until then, he's Kyle at Kyle Teige on Twitter. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. Please do, follow our Instagram and TikTok at DaneMooreNBA_podcast. Always want to plug that. Our guys are churning out some content over there, and then the YouTube channel. I know most of you listen via podcast, but if you want to look at Kyle's glorious mustache that I think you're saving until the Wolves lose 2 games in a row. That's a thing, right?
274 straight days, man. They got to do. Can you imagine if they don't lose 2
You haven't
in a row?
had the mustache for 274 days.
No, at this age in my life, I can grow facial hair a little quicker, but I will not cut. It's terrible. It's gross, but I will not cut it until they lose back-to-back games. So, yeah, I might be actively rooting for a bad week, but we'll see what happens.
All right. He's Kyle. Until Monday with Chris, I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hard so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.